Welcome to the deep dive. We dig into a whole heap of sources, find the real gems, and basically give you the quick route to getting up to speed. Today, we are diving deep into something pretty amazing, actually, the transformative power of tiny changes. How small habits can genuinely reshape your life.
Yeah, we've got some great stuff to work with here. Mostly excerpts from a really influential book on habits, Atomic Habits, mixed in with some related talks and discussions. It's full of these powerful stories and really practical takeaways.
Mm-hmm.
And our goal here is pretty straightforward. Boil down the core ideas from all this. We want to get under the hood, understand how these small actions stack up over time, and give you a clear, usable framework for building the habits you actually want and ditching the ones that are dragging you down.
Think of it as your habit masterclass condensed.
Exactly. Your essential guide.
All right, let's get straight into it. Because the sources kick off with a story that, wow, it really hits home how powerful this stuff can be, especially when things look, well, bleak. It's the author's own story.
Yeah, he was a young baseball player, seemed like he had a bright future, and then bam, hit smack in the face with a baseball bat.
Oof.
And not just a bump. This was life-changingly serious. Multiple seizures, induced coma, broken bones, a really long, tough recovery.
Yeah.
So when he finally got back to playing, it was rough. Cut from varsity, barely played in high school.
Mm-hmm.
Understandably, he felt totally defeated, depressed, overwhelmed.
Right. So how do you bounce back from that, from feeling completely sidelined? The sources really point to this turning point when he got to college. He made a conscious choice to focus on these tiny, consistent habits.
That's it. He started small, lifting weights a few times a week, not like killing himself every session, but just being consistent.
Mm-hmm.
And over a couple of years, that simple habit, repeated, it compounded. Big physical change went from about 170 pounds to 200 pounds, lean muscle.
And that wasn't just about looks, right? It spilled over.
Yeah, totally. That physical change fueled success on the field. He became team captain all conference. And despite that really rough high school patch, he ended up being named the top male athlete at his university. Even got academic All-America honors.
Wow.
It wasn't one giant leap. It was those small, consistent steps adding up day after day, year after year, leading to these remarkable results he just couldn't have imagined before.
That's a powerful personal story. But the sources don't just leave it there. They give us this, massive organizational example, too. British cycling.
Oh, yeah, this one's fascinating. Before this guy, Dave Brailsford, took over in 2003, their record was, well, it was abysmal.
Abysmal is putting it mildly, wasn't it? Like 1 Olympic gold in over a century.
Right. And 0 wins in the Tour de France in 110 years. 0.
It was so bad I read that a big bike manufacturer wouldn't even sell them bikes, worried it would tarnish their brand.
Exactly. They were associated with failure.
Yeah.
So Brailsford comes in with this radically simple idea, the aggregation of marginal gains.
Marginal gains.
Yeah. The concept was find every single tiny thing related to cycling performance and improve it by just 1%. Just 1%. Not looking for breakthroughs, just tiny tweaks everywhere.
And the examples are kind of legendary, aren't they? They went way beyond just the bike itself.
Oh, way beyond. Of course, they optimized seats, tires, all that. But then rider diet down to the gram, different massage gels, the exact pillows and mattresses for the best possible sleep.
Didn't they paint the inside of the team truck white?
They did. To spot any tiny bits of dust that could potentially get into the bike mechanics and hinder performance, even slightly.
Okay, that sounds intense. But you can't argue with the results, can you?
Not at all. The turnaround was just staggering. In only 5 years, they went from that history of failure to winning 60% of the gold medals at the Beijing Olympics.
Incredible.
Then London 2012, 9 Olympic records, 7 world records. That same year, Bradley Wiggins gets the first ever British Tour de France win. Chris Froome wins 4 of the next 5.
So over a decade, it's just this explosion of success. Hundreds of championships, dozens of Olympic golds, multiple tour wins.
Yeah, 178 world championships, 66 Olympic golds, 5 Tour de France wins. It was unprecedented dominance. And it wasn't magic. It was just hundreds of those 1% improvements adding up, compounding.
Okay, so this 1% better idea, it sounds small day to day, but how does it actually lead to being, was it 37 times better over a year? Is there some, math trick?
It's actually straightforward compounding math. Yeah, the sources lay it out. If you improve by just 1% each day, that's 1.01 multiplied by itself 365 times.
Okay.
And 1.01 to the power of 365 is 37.78. So you end up almost 38 times better.
Wow. That's way more than you'd intuitively think.
Right. But here's the flip side. Get 1% worse each day. That's 0.99 to the power of 365, and you basically end up at 0, like 0.03.
Ouch. So those tiny negative habits, the little slip-ups, they compound downwards just as powerfully.
Exactly. The gap between those small daily choices, positive or negative, becomes enormous over time.
So habits really are like compound interest for self-improvement. Feels like nothing's happening day to day, maybe.
Yeah, like putting pennies in a jar.
Right. But stick with it. And months or years later, the difference is huge. You only really see the value or the cost looking back.
And this actually explains a really common frustration people have when starting new habits. The sources call it the plateau of latent potential.
Plateau of latent potential. Okay, what's that?
It's that feeling when you start something new, say running every morning, you do it for weeks, maybe a month, you're putting in the effort.
And you look in the mirror and nothing. Feels like zero change.
Exactly. You feel like, what's the point? All this work for nothing. It's really discouraging because the results seem totally delayed.
Yeah, you want that instant feedback.
But the key insight is the work wasn't wasted. It was being stored up, building potential under the surface, like ice
Yeah.
forming water gets colder and colder, looks the same, then suddenly hits 32 degrees and bang, it freezes solid.
Or that bamboo analogy they use, spends years underground building roots.
Right. Building this huge hidden root system, then suddenly shoots up 90 feet in just 6 weeks. The visible results often come much, much later. After all that initial, seemingly unproductive effort, you just have to push through that plateau.
Okay, so persistence is key. But just having a goal like, I want to run a marathon, isn't always enough to make you persist, is it? The sources argue that focusing only on the goal can actually be a problem, which feels wrong. Don't you need goals?
Goals give you direction, absolutely, but relying only on them has pitfalls. One big one is survivorship bias.
Survivorship bias.
Yeah, we look at the winners, the gold medalist, the successful CEO, and think, wow, they had ambitious goals. But we forget about the thousands of others who had the exact same goal and failed. The goal itself wasn't the magic ingredient.
Right, like every Olympian wants gold. Every job applicant wants the job. The goal doesn't separate winners from losers.
Exactly. The British cyclists always wanted to win the Tour. That goal wasn't new. What changed was Brailsford's system, the aggregation of marginal gains.
Okay. What else is wrong with just focusing on goals?
Well, achieving a goal is often just a temporary fix. Your goal is to clean your messy room. Great, you clean it. Goal achieved. But if you don't change the system, the habits that made it messy in the first place, it'll just get messy again next week.
Like the yo-yo dieting effect. You hit the weight goal, you celebrate, you stop the diet habits.
And the weight comes right back. Because your motivation was tied entirely to that one outcome, not to the ongoing process. Goals are often at odds with long-term progress because they imply an endpoint.
So goals are about winning the game once, but systems are about setting things up so you can keep playing the game indefinitely.
That's a great way to put it. The sources argue that true long-term thinking is actually kind of goalless thinking. It's not about chasing finish lines. It's about continuously refining and improving your process, your system.
And that leads to that really powerful quote they hammer home.
You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems.
That's the one. It really sticks with you.
It's fundamental. An atomic habit, in this context, isn't just any small habit. It's a small habit that's a building block within a larger, well-designed system. If you want better results, stop obsessing over the goal itself and focus on improving your system.
Build the engine. Don't just dream about the destination. Makes sense. And this idea of systems goes even deeper, doesn't it? The sources talk about linking habits to who you actually are or want to be. These 3 layers.
Right, the 3 layers of behavior change. Outcomes, what you get. Processes, what you do.
Yeah.
And identity, what you believe about yourself.
And the argument is that the most powerful, lasting changes happen at that identity level.
Exactly. Most people start with outcomes. I want to lose weight. That's okay. Better is focusing on the process. I will go to the gym 3 times a week. But the most effective approach is identity-based. I want to become the type of person who is fit and healthy.
So it shifts from doing something to get a result to doing something because that's who you are.
Precisely. The goal isn't just to read a book. It's to become a reader. The goal isn't just to run a marathon. It's to become a runner. It's a subtle shift, but it's crucial. Your behaviors tend to align with your sense of self.
Yeah, I remember hearing about studies like people who identified as voters were more likely to actually vote than people who were just encouraged to vote.
That's a classic example. The sources argue that a major reason habits fail long-term is because our self-image gets in the way. If you deep down see yourself as not a morning person, getting up early feels like fighting yourself. Real change often requires editing those core beliefs, upgrading your identity
And how do you do that? How do you change your identity?
through your actions. Your habits become the evidence. Every time you do the habit, you're casting a vote for the type of person you want to become. You're providing proof to yourself.
So the habit isn't just the task, it's the proof.
Exactly. The author didn't just decide he was a writer. He became a writer by consistently publishing articles. Those actions built the evidence that reinforced the identity.
Yeah.
Your habits are how you embody who you aspire to be.
Okay, this is powerful stuff. We get the compounding, the systems over goals, the identity piece.
Yeah.
Now, the nuts and bolts, how do we actually build these atomic habits? The sources lay out a pretty clear 4-step model, right? Based on habit science.
Yeah, it builds on basic principles, like Thorndike's law of effect, basically. Actions followed by satisfying consequences get repeated. Habits are essentially a feedback loop the brain uses to automate useful behaviors.
And that loop has 4 parts. First, the cue, the
Yeah.
trigger, right? The thing that grabs your attention.
Correct. The signal that predicts a reward is nearby.
Then stage 2 is the craving. That's
Right.
the motivation, the desire for the reward, the cue promises.
Yep, the wanting part.
Third is the response. That's the actual habit itself, the action you take, physical or mental. And finally, number 4 is the reward, the payoff. It satisfies the craving and crucially teaches the brain, hey, this loop worked. Let's remember this.
Exactly. Cue, craving, response, reward. That's the backbone of every habit.
Okay, let's walk through some examples from the sources to make it concrete. The donut shop one.
Right. You smell donuts, cue.
Yeah.
You suddenly really want a donut. Craving, you buy and eat it.
Hmm.
Craving satisfied,
Yeah.
sugar rush, reward. Your brain links that smell and location to satisfaction.
Or the social media one. You had a block working, cue, you feel frustrated, want relief, craving it. You grab your phone, scroll, response, temporary distraction, feeling of relief, reward. Feeling stuck gets tied to checking your phone.
Yeah. Or even simpler. Walk into a dark room. Cue, want to see, correct the light switch, response, you can see craving satisfied, reward, automatic.
And the key is, if any one of those steps is weak or missing, the habit doesn't stick, right?
Precisely. No cue, nothing starts. No craving, no motivation. Response is too difficult, you won't do it. Reward isn't satisfying, you won't bother repeating it. The loop breaks down.
Got it. So logically, to build good habits, we need to manipulate this loop. Make the cue obvious, the craving attractive, the response easy, and the reward satisfying.
And flip it for bad habits. Make the cue invisible, the craving unattractive, the response difficult, and the reward unsatisfying.
And that leads directly into the 4 laws of behavior chain from the sources, a practical framework.
Exactly. Simple rules derived from that habit loop.
Okay, law 1, make it obvious. This sounds like it starts with just noticing.
Awareness is the bedrock, yeah. You can't fix what you don't see. Our brains are constantly scanning, picking up cues unconsciously. Think about an expert, like a paramedic seeing subtle signs of a heart attack, or a radiologist spotting a tiny anomaly on a scan. They often know before they can explain why.
Their brains have learned the patterns.
Exactly. And our daily habits become just as automatic, just as non-conscious. We react to cues without even thinking about it.
It makes me think of that Carl Jung quote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate."
That's perfect. You have to bring these automatic behaviors into awareness first. A really simple tool the sources suggest is the habit scoreboard.
Habit scoreboard.
Yeah, just for a day or two, list out your daily habits. Woke up, checked phone, brushed teeth, made coffee, and mark each one, positive, plus, negative, or neutral. Just doing that forces you to actually see what you're doing all day and what might be triggering those actions.
Okay, so it's
Got it.
awareness first. Then, how do you make the good cues obvious?
One powerful way is using implementation intentions. It's basically pre-deciding when and where you'll perform a habit. The formula is simple. I will behavior at time and location. Or, when situation X happens, I'll perform behavior Y.
So instead of vaguely saying I'll exercise more, you say I will go for a run at 7 a.m. on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, starting at the park entrance.
Exactly. The sources cite this great study on exercise. One group got a motivational talk, didn't change much. Another group got the top, plus they had to write down their specific plan, when and where they'd exercise. Their follow-through rate more than doubled. Just having that specific plan makes the time and place an obvious cue.
That makes sense. And related to that is habit stacking.
Right. Linking a new habit, you want to build onto an existing habit you already do automatically. The formula is, after I current habit, I will new habit.
Like after I pour my morning coffee, I will meditate for 1 minute. The coffee becomes the cue for meditation.
Precisely. Your current habits are already ingrained cues. And this all ties into environment design, making cues for good habits physically obvious in your space.
Like leaving your running shoes by the door.
Yeah. Or putting your guitar stand in the middle of the living room, not hidden in a closet. Put fruit in a bowl on the counter, not buried in the fridge drawer. Make the cues for the actions you want to take visible and easy to see.
And hide the cues for bad habits. Put the cookies on a high shelf. Turn off phone notifications.
Exactly. Redesign your environment to make the good choices the easy, obvious choices. Take control of the cues around you. They even suggest the one space, one use idea if you can manage it, like your desk is only for work, the couch is only for relaxing. It helps build strong context cue associations.
Okay, law 1. Make it obvious. Got it. Law 2. Make it attractive. This is about the craving part, right? Making you want to do the habit.
Yeah, it digs into motivation. Cravings aren't usually for the habit itself, but for the underlying feeling or state it promises. You don't crave scrolling Instagram, you crave relief from boredom or anxiety. You don't crave cleaning, you crave the feeling of a calm, orderly space. It's the anticipated change in state that drives the craving.
And dopamine plays a big role here, doesn't it? The anticipation.
Usual. The brain releases dopamine not just when you get the reward, but in anticipation of it. That spike in dopamine is the craving, the desire. It's what gets you moving. So, to make a habit attractive, you need to ramp up that anticipation, associate it with positive feeling.
How do you do that?
A really clever technique is temptation bundling. You pair an action you want to do with an action you need to do.
The Netflix and exercise bike example. Only watch your favorite show while you're working out.
That's the classic one. Or maybe you only listen to your favorite podcast while doing chores. Or only get that fancy coffee after you've completed your most important task for the day. You link the want to the need, making the need more attractive because it unlocks the want.
That's smart. What else makes habits attractive? The social angle seems big in the sources.
Immense. We are fundamentally social creatures, wired to fit in. We tend to imitate the habits of 3 groups: the close, family, friends; the many, our tribe or culture; and the powerful, those with status we admire.
So if your friends are all runners, you're more likely to start running.
Much more likely. They mentioned studies showing things like obesity spreading through social networks. Or think about the Asch conformity experiment. People literally deny the evidence of their own eyes just to agree with the group. Joining a group where your desired behavior is the norm makes that behavior instantly more attractive. Want to read more? Join a book club. Want to get fit? Hang out with fit people.
Makes sense. Surround yourself with the habits you want to adopt. And the flip side for breaking bad habits, make it unattractive.
Exactly. Reframe the perceived benefits. Smoking isn't stress relief, it's poisoning yourself. Mindless scrolling isn't relaxing, it's wasting precious time you could use productively. Highlight the real downsides. Associate the bad habit with negative feelings instead of positive ones. Change the story you tell yourself about it.
Okay, law 3. Make it easy. This feels intuitive. We prefer easy things.
It taps into a core principle, the law of least effort. Humans are naturally wired to conserve energy. Given multiple options, we'll almost always drift towards the one that requires the least work, the least friction. It's not laziness, it's efficiency.
So good habits often fail because they feel like too much work, too much friction.
Often, yeah. Think about all the steps involved in going to the gym versus sinking into the couch. The key is to reduce the friction for good habits and increase it for bad habits.
How do you reduce friction?
Environment design again, but focused on ease. Priming the environment. Lay out your workout clothes the night before. Prep healthy meal ingredients on Sunday. Set up your workspace so everything you need is within reach. Each little step you remove makes the habit more likely to happen.
And increase friction for bad habits, like unplugging the TV after use or deleting social media apps from your phone.
Exactly. Put the remote batteries in another room. Leave your phone charging overnight far from your bedroom. Even small barriers can be enough to disrupt an automatic bad habit because it now requires more effort.
The sources also talk about decisive moments, these small choices that set your path.
Yeah, those little hinge points in the day. Do I put on running shoes or slippers? Do I open my textbook or video game? These tiny choices drastically shape the next hour or even the rest of the day. Getting good at making the slightly better choice in those moments is huge.
And for starting new habits, the 2-minute rule.
Brilliant rule. Scale down any new habit so the very first step takes less than 2 minutes. Read every day becomes read 1 page. Do yoga becomes take out my yoga mat. Run 3 miles becomes put on my running shoes.
Why does that work?
It lowers the barrier to starting so much that it's almost impossible not to do it. You're not worried about the whole workout. You just focus on the first 2 minutes. It helps you master the art of showing up. You build the ritual first, then you can optimize it later. Standardize before you optimize.
And underlying all this ease stuff is repetition, right? Building the
Yeah.
pathway.
Absolutely. Habit formation is fundamentally about repetition, making a behavior automatic.
Mhm.
They mention Hebb's law. Neurons that fire together wire together. Every time you repeat an action, the neural circuits involved get more efficient. That's why practice works. It literally rewires your brain.
Yeah.
And it's the number of repetitions that matters most, not necessarily the amount of time passed.
Yeah.
You need enough reps to make it automatic.
Okay, final law. Law 4. Make it satisfying. We do things that feel good.
Pretty much. We're more likely to repeat a behavior if the ending is satisfying. Pleasure signals to the brain, that was good. Remember that. Do it again.
But the problem is, lots of good habits have delayed rewards, right? Like saving money or eating salad. The payoff is way down the road.
Exactly. Modern life is full of delayed return environments. But our brains evolved in an immediate return world. Find food, eat now, see danger, run now. That's why things like self-control are hard. You're often choosing a delayed benefit over an immediate pleasure or relief. The immediate outcome of not eating the cookie is, well, nothing satisfying happens right away.
So we need to find ways to add some immediate satisfaction to good habits.
Yes, find a way to give yourself a little win right after you complete the habit. The sources use that great hand-washing example from Pakistan. Giving people nice, pleasant-smelling soap significantly increased hand-washing rates long-term, much more than just education about germs.
Why?
Because the nice smell and the feeling of clean hands were immediately satisfying. It made the habit itself more enjoyable in the moment, reinforcing it even before the long-term health benefits kicked in.
Like flavored toothpaste making brushing more pleasant.
Exactly. Or tracking your habit and getting the satisfaction of checking off the box or seeing your streak grow. Find some small, immediate reward that signals success to your brain.
And for bad habits, the inversion. Make it unsatisfying. Make it immediately painful.
This is where things like accountability partners or habit contracts come in. Having someone watch you or having real consequences for slipping up adds immediate pain to failing the habit.
They shared that detailed story of the entrepreneur, Brian Harris, right? With the contract.
Yeah, a written contract with his wife and trainer, specific daily habits, and if he failed. Really unpleasant consequences, having to dress up in ridiculous outfits, paying his trainer money, wearing a rival sports team's jersey.
Ouch. Knowing that's waiting for you makes skipping the workout way less appealing.
Totally. The potential for immediate embarrassment or cost makes the failure unsatisfying right now. Even just telling a friend your goal and having them check in adds a layer of social cost if you don't follow through. Governments do this too, with fines for speeding or smoking indoors, adding immediate negative consequences.
Okay, so the 4 laws give us a really solid toolkit. Obvious, attractive, easy, satisfying. But what about when things go wrong? Or other advanced stuff? What if you miss a day?
The key rule the source of stress is simple: never miss twice.
Never missed one.
Look, everyone slips up. You miss a workout, you eat junk food one night, it happens. The key is not to let one miss turn into 2 or 3 or a complete abandonment of the habit. Missing once is an accident. Missing twice is the start of a new negative pattern. So forgive the first miss, but make absolutely sure you get back on track the very next day. Damage control.
That's good practical advice. What about tracking? We mentioned it can be satisfying, but the sources also warn about a dark side. Goodhart's Law.
Right. Goodhart's Law basically says when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure.
Meaning?
Meaning if you focus only on hitting the number you're tracking, you can lose sight of the actual purpose behind it. You might hit your sales target by pushing bad deals, or get your 10,000 steps by just pacing around pointlessly instead of improving overall health, or teach kids only what's on the test instead of fostering real learning.
So the metric becomes the goal, and you game the metric.
Exactly. Measurement is super useful for feedback. Is my system working? But don't let optimizing the number replace the reason you started tracking in the first place.
Yeah.
Keep the purpose in mind.
Okay. The sources also get into genetics, which is interesting. The idea that we're kind of predisposed to certain things.
Yeah, they acknowledge that genes do play a role. Some people are naturally more suited to certain physical activities. Some personality traits like extroversion or conscientiousness seem partly genetic. They use the Michael Phelps versus Hijamel Garouge example. The swimmer built like a torpedo, the runner built lean with long legs. They succeeded partly by choosing sports that fit their natural physical gifts.
So the idea isn't just work harder, but work harder at the right things for you. Find your game.
Kind of. It's about aligning your efforts with your natural inclinations where possible. Play a game where the odds are tilted slightly in your favor by your nature. But they also caution against just saying, oh, they're successful because of luck or genes, until you put in comparable focused effort. Genes influence, they don't fully determine. Strategy picking the right field matters a lot.
What about staying motivated long term? Things get, well,
Yeah.
boring, right?
Huge challenge. The sources talk about the Goldilocks rule. We're most motivated when a task is right on the edge of our current abilities. Not too easy, boring, not too hard, discouraging, but just right.
Okay.
But even in the Goldilocks zone, as you improve, habits become routine, automatic.
Yeah.
And routine can feel tedious. The biggest threat to long-term success isn't usually failure, it's boredom.
So how do you deal with that?
You have to cultivate discipline. The sources point to professionals, athletes, musicians, writers. They don't just practice when they feel inspired, they stick to the schedule. They put in the reps even when it's dull, even when they don't feel like it. Steve Martin doing comedy for 18 years, often to tiny audiences. That's falling in love with the process, even the boring parts. You have to be willing to embrace the boredom sometimes.
That's a tough pill to swallow, but probably true. Consistency over intensity, even when it's not exciting.
Exactly. And finally, there's even a potential downside to habits becoming too automatic.
Really? How can being automatic be bad? Isn't that the goal?
It's the foundation of mastery, yes. Automating the basics frees up your mind for higher level thinking. But deep automaticity can also lead to mindlessness. You go on autopilot, stop paying attention, stop noticing errors or opportunities for improvement. Complacency sets in.
Ah, okay. So you get good, but then you stop getting better because you're not actively engaged anymore.
Precisely. They use Pat Riley's career best effort program with the Lakers. These guys were already champions, super skilled. But Riley tracked things beyond points and rebounds, hustle plays, effort metrics. It forced even these elite players to stay consciously engaged, to keep focusing on the small details, preventing that slide into complacency that can happen when success becomes routine.
Which highlights the need for ongoing reflection and review.
Absolutely. The author mentions his own practice of doing an annual review, what worked, what didn't, lessons learned, and an integrity report, checking if his actions align with his stated values and identity. These deliberate moments of reflection pull you out of autopilot, let you course correct, and ensure your habits are still serving the person you want to be.
It keeps the system alive and evolving rather than just running on old programming.
Exactly.
Looking back at everything, there are some really core ideas that keep popping up, aren't there?
Definitely. Like the simple fact that awareness comes before desire. You have to notice something before you can want it. Or that happiness might be less about chasing pleasure and more about the absence of craving, finding contentment.
Yeah, and that suffering is often just that gap between what we crave and what we have.
Right. And that emotion is the real driver of behavior, not just logic.
Yeah.
We act because we feel the urge.
And that reward almost always follows sacrifice. You got to do the work first.
Mm-hmm. And revisiting why self-control is tough, because resisting temptation isn't inherently satisfying in the moment. It requires actively letting go of a desire, which takes effort.
This has been incredibly useful, really breaking down how these tiny shifts work. The main message from all these sources seems crystal clear. Forget massive overhauls. Focus on your systems. Use those small atomic habits. Understand the cue craving response reward loop, apply the 4 laws, and really think about building the identity you want. That's the path.
Absolutely. And maybe take a second now to think about your own habits, your own systems. Are they generally pushing you forward, even slightly? Or are they maybe subtly holding you back? Based on everything we've talked about, what's one tiny atomic change you could make, maybe even today, in your environment, in your routine?
Yeah, just one small thing. And here's a final thought to chew on, pulling from the sources. If our environment shapes our actions so much, maybe even more than willpower, and if we naturally take the path of least resistance, how could you intentionally redesign your world, your physical space, your digital habits, your schedule, to make the things that truly matter most to you also the easiest, most obvious, and most satisfying things to do? Thanks for diving deep with us today. Hopefully these insights give you some powerful tools to build the life you want, one small habit at a time.